journalists imprisoned worldwide reached a record high this year. Honoring the courage of our reporters, photographers, and others in the face of threats, harassment, and detention is at the core of our mission. Here are some updates I want to share. The Syrian government released, excuse my pronunciation, Kamarman Kunayet Unal on November 17th. He had been held captive for almost 3 months. We are relieved that Junet has been reunited safely with his family. Junet and Al Hura correspondent Bashir Fahmy went missing while reporting from Aleppo, Syria, on August 20th. The board is deeply disturbed by the continuing lack of information about Bashar. The board calls on anybody with information about his whereabouts to step forward and calls for his immediate release to the safety of his family. We welcome the support of the Southeast Europe Media Organization in Istanbul, which awarded Bashar and Junet its 10th annual Human Rights Award on December 6th. We will continue to investigate every possible avenue to secure Bashar's release. In Cuba, Antonio Rudilis, the Cuba-based independent producer of the Emmy-nominated TV Martí program Estado de Sats, was jailed in Havana after seeking information on the arrest of 2 Cuban dissidents. After 19 days in jail, Rudilis was released and charges of resisting authority were dropped. In Azerbaijan, Yafez Hassanov, an RFE-RL correspondent, has received repeated telephone calls and text messages from unidentified persons threatening reprisals against him and his family if he does not stop investigating the death last year of a man in the custody of Azerbaijan's Ministry of National Security. We appreciate the U.S. Embassy Baku's concern about Yafez's safety. In Tajikistan, earlier this month, the government blocked access to the website of RFE-RFL's Tajik service, Radio Ozodi, only days after authorities blocked Facebook inside the country. We deeply appreciate the support of the U.S. Embassy, Dushanbe, on the local EU mission in Dushanbe, and the support of local and international media and advocacy groups in protesting the blockage, which was reversed on December 2nd. In Egypt, an Al Hura reporter covering the constitutional crisis in Egypt received threats on his cell phone from an unidentified person. In Angola, VOA is concerned about its local reporter, Antonio Capalandanda, who was robbed of his equipment while walking on the street. Previously, Capalandanda was called in by secret police and offered a car, a house, and other things in exchange for him to stop reporting for VOA. He declined the offer and kept reporting for VOA. VOA is currently looking into the circumstances surrounding the robbery. In Zimbabwe, VOA reporters face renewed threats from the ruling party ZANU, which wants to encourage independent reporting. The head of the party's Media Science and Technology Committee referred to VOA's Studio 7 as hostile foreign media and has called on the government to do more to jam its signal. Clearly, attacks persist against the free flow of information, including the harassment and detention of journalists and censorship of independent media. The board calls on governments to cease the intimidation and incarceration of journalists and to hold accountable those who try to obstruct their reporting or harm them for simply doing their jobs. On a happier note, we are pleased to learn that Hadija Ismailova, an investigative journalist for RFE-RL's Azerbaijan service, received the Courage in Journalism Award from the International Women's Media Foundation. Ismailova was honored for her unflinching reporting in the face of continued harassment, slander, campaigns, and blackmail for her investigations into corruption within the Azerbaijan's ruling family. We look forward to hearing from her later in this meeting during RFE-RL's report. We will now proceed to the adoption of the minutes of October 11th, 2012 meeting. The board held its last formal meeting on October 11th, 2012 at the BBG headquarters in Washington, D.C. The minutes of the October 2012 meeting are found behind tab 2 in the briefing book. Do any governors have comments or questions about the minutes? No?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any objections? The minutes have been approved. We now move to the Governance Committee report. The Governance Committee met yesterday to deal with a number of important issues, including the proposed creation of a Chief Executive Officer for U.S. International Broadcasting. I would like to ask Governor Malhop, Chair of BBG Governance Committee, to give a report to the Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to provide this report concerning the activities of the Governance Committee. Since our last plenary board meeting in October, the Governance Committee has held 2 meetings on October 8th and yesterday. While the committee dealt with a number of important issues, perhaps the most important among these has been the follow-up on the board's September 2012 decision to create the position of Chief Executive Officer of United States International Broadcasting under the agency's existing statutory authority. The creation of a day-to-day executive with authority over both the federal and non-federal elements of USIB has been the subject of board discussion for nearly 2 years. The committee notes that the BBG strategic plan, which the board adopted in October 2011, calls for the creation of a CEO. In addition, the board decided in January 2012 to pursue legislation called the International Broadcasting Innovation Act. The board decided that a central feature of the IBIA should be the creation of a CEO. As we all know, the development of legislation takes time. The IBB director has formed a working group to develop the IBIA and is making good progress. But realistically, the passage of legislation to restructure USIB and to create a CEO may take more than a year. In the interim, the board felt that it would be beneficial to create a CEO under the board's existing statutory framework and subject to its well-understood limitations. This was the thrust of the board's September 2012 decision. As required by the board's 2012 decision, the IBB director has developed a plan to create a CEO under existing legislation. The proposed plan addresses the following issues: the authorities that should be delegated from the board to the CEO, the agency officers who should report directly to the CEO, the relationship of the CEO and the IBB director, the relationship between the CEO and the grantees, including how the relationship should be formalized and expressed in the grant agreements, the limitations that should be placed on the CEO's authority to protect the integrity and independence of journalism conducted by the BBG-sponsored broadcasters, and a proposed budget and timeline for implementation of a CEO. I would like to commend the IBB director and his staff for their efforts in developing the plan and in working with the BBG-sponsored broadcasting entities to obtain their input on the feasibility of the plan. The Governance Committee considered the IBB director's plan. It is clear that a CEO created under existing legislation will have important limitations due to the features of the existing International Broadcasting Act. These limitations include the sweeping non-delegable authorities given to the board under the Act, the limitations under existing legislation, and the possible supervisory relationships with the federal agency, within the federal agency, between the CEO and, respectively, the IBB director, the VOA director, and the OCB director, and the exercise of the CEO's authority vis-a-vis the BBG-sponsored grantees, which are private nonprofit corporations. The latter issue, establishing legally appropriate governance relationships between the CEO and the grantees, is a particularly thorny one. The committee feels that it needs more time to study the IBB director's plan in detail and to work out a few of the more difficult details of the plan. Nevertheless, the sense of the majority of the committee members is that proceeding with the creation of a CEO under existing legislation, notwithstanding these limitations, is a meaningful first step toward the achievement of the board's objective of providing a day-to-day executive with authority over both the federal and non-federal elements of USIB. I therefore move that the board decide as follows. First, that the board reaffirm its commitment to create a CEO under existing legislation. To this end, the board authorizes and directs the Governance Committee to conduct a review of the IBB director's plan and to make further recommendations regarding the details of the plan to the plenary board. Second, that the IBB director direct the BBG Office of General Counsel to work with the general counsels of the BBG-sponsored grantees to develop appropriate amendments to the grant agreements to effect the intent of the board's 2012 decision to empower the CEO to act as the day-to-day executive of BBG-sponsored U.S. International Broadcasting, including both its federal and non-federal components to the fullest extent permitted under existing law. I make that motion.
Governor
Torres, Governor, saying just some comments.
Please.
Mr. Chair, I thought we had a very good governance committee meeting yesterday and a healthy discussion, and all 4 members were present for the item. I do think, Chairman, I'm only speaking for myself. I think a CEO, particularly as it relates to VOA, IBB, and OCB, is worthwhile and should be moved upon. I think there are major legal issues and congressional issues involving what authority and to what degree the CEO, if created, would have over the 3 grantees. And I also feel, as brought up, that there should be an independent legal opinion sought as to whether or not that, from a source that has no particular bias. General counsels from entities may, at least perception-wise, have a bias. General counsel for BBG may perception-wise have a bias. And we should try to find an independent, objective law firm, which presumably has no bias. That'll be easier said than done, but and to review the matter and come back and tell us. I also think there has to be very close congressional notification and participation on this, because each of the entities have a constituency on Capitol Hill that are very interested in how they're doing and don't want to see various areas compromised if indeed they thought that might happen. But I think it's an important issue, and I certainly think we should move forward in terms of that area where there's not an issue. I also think, ultimately, the success of this plan will be in the details. That is, what authority the CEO has, how he or she will be selected, what his or her duties are to the board and to the members of the board, and how we go forward with that process. So I'm certainly conceptually supportive, but I also, even though I'm going to vote for the motion, reserve final judgment as to what ultimately appears to be in the plan. The plan could turn out to be one that I enthusiastically support. It also could turn out to be one that I do not support.
I think that's completely fair. We are today voting on the concept, I think, more so than any of the details, which are going to be to be worked out.
Should we, do I have a second on them?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Are there any opposed? The motion has passed.
Moving on, Mr. Chairman, to the international travel policy. The committee also discussed the adoption of guidelines for international travel that would apply to both governors and members of agency senior staff. The crux of these guidelines is that the board should be informed about international travel, where practicable, undertaken by the governors and members of agency senior staff, including the objectives and costs of the travel. The guidelines make it clear that agency senior staff should report about their international travel to the IBB director, who will prepare a report for the board. These guidelines were developed by Governor McHugh in consultation with other governors. A copy of the proposed guidelines have been provided for the consideration of the board. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I would like to invite Governor McHugh to discuss the guidelines that she has proposed.
I can never get this thing to work. Thank you, Governor Mulhall. Does everyone have a copy of the, okay. These are just general guidelines for travel. As Governor Mulhall said, this is about notification and awareness and transparency. So this is about the governors knowing about senior staff travel and staff knowing about governors' travel. It's really just about everyone understanding and knowing what's happening. I also want to say that we're putting down a marker here. These can be updated. We expect them to be modified. They can be expanded at future board meetings, but I think this is a good start. So do I need to read through them? Or
only if you want to, or if anybody has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I think we all know it, but since we are on webcam, I think just maybe outlining some of the high points of the 20 people that are watching us who might
Well,
want
I'd
to know.
like this to go on the web.
Doubling our viewership.
And we'll put this on the web too, right?
We should, yes.
Yeah, okay. General guidelines, BBG governors, BBG senior management, and staff travel should be linked to the agency's strategic plan and/or BBG needs and supportive objectives that are clearly defined before the trip. I think that's pretty self-evident. In consultation with the governors and entity directors, BBG management and staff will develop a priority list of travel targets consistent with the strategic plan. This list will be reviewed at subsequent board meetings. The full board will be notified in advance of governor's travel, and the IBB director will be notified of IBB, BBG, senior management, and staff travel. Governors and IBB, BBG, senior management will report on completed travel, including purpose and outcomes where appropriate. BBG senior staff will report on upcoming staff travel as appropriate and judicious. Entity heads and IBB, BBG senior management should be consulted regarding regional priorities and strategic perspectives that should be considered in planning of governor's travel. That's it. It's pretty straightforward and simple, and I think it's a good start.
Want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt this resolution.
I would second the motion, Mr. Governor Mohop and or Governor Linton. And let me just add first appreciation to Governor McHugh for her work on this. It was pointed out that by the OIG folks that we did not have an actual written policy, which I think certainly is a valid comment, and we should have. But I think, and I'm saying some of this for public consumption, the actual travel by board members internationally is quite small compared to senior staff. That isn't to be critical of senior staff. They have day-to-day operational responsibilities. But most board members make one or two, most three international trips a year, whereas some senior staff may make 6 or 8. And again, that's not to be critical. That's simply the nature of their work. But in terms of actual expenses that the board has, and there are only 7 of us now, one of us, Secretary of State, it's not going to reimburse from the board. She would travel through, so it's only 6 that even potentially would be reimbursed by the board, is a substantially small amount. I think about a total of $200,000 compared to over $4 million that is allocated for the total staff travel of BBG. So as a percentage of the total travel, I think it's important to realize the 6 members of the board take up a relatively small percentage. That isn't to say it shouldn't be looked at, shouldn't be inspected, and because we're all presidential appointees, we get the attention that people who are not presidential appointees never get. And that just comes with the turf. And Governor Meehan will be reporting shortly on the trip that Governor McHugh and he recently completed with Libby Liu and David Enzer to Burma or Myanmar. I can report Libby Liu flew economy the whole way, and row 43, seat H, is not always fun. All I'm trying to say is that we comply with the Fly America Act. The entities are supposed to comply with it as well, which sets out very rigorous and precise standards as to travel. And I think it's important we have a game plan. I think travel is important for members of the board to have a better understanding of issues we deal with, whether it's traveling to Greenville, North Carolina to look at the Edward Murrow transmission station or visiting the 2 transmission stations in Thailand that no governor had ever been to previously, which are essential for Asia in terms of shortwave. All of those are part of, I think, our due diligence. So I have no hesitancy in being very supportive of international travel, at the same time feeling it should be transparent. They're not hesitate to explain what the cost is, what the purpose is, how long we were gone, and everything that was done. And I think we'll see a very good report on our recent visit to Burma, where we met with the president as well as the leader of the opposition, Daw Aung Suu Kyi.
That is, transparency is the goal. This is not meant to discourage travel. This is an international agency,
No.
for sure. It's really just about being notified and informed. I know I'll be a better governor if I'm aware of where senior executive management are traveling quick note, this doesn't apply to in-country travel and our field reporters, et cetera. This is about executive management.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the Broadcasting Board of Governors deals with broadcasting outside the United States. We're not broadcasting within the United States. So if you're going to attend to the business of the board, you have to travel somewhere outside the United States, or I guess just watch it on the internet. But I mean, if you're going to travel, by definition, it's going to be somewhere outside the boundaries of the United States. But again, I think this was needed. It's long overdue. I'm glad you brought it. I'm sure there'll be modifications to it. I also think it's important that senior staff have to get approval, and it is rigorously reviewed, so we don't send too many people to a conference. We send enough, but not overloaded. And in a time of declining budgets, that we be frugal and directed in how our travel occurs.
Great.
Okay. I think we need a
Did we
vote.
do it all in favor on that?
We need a
Well,
vote.
no, the chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, two more quick things, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, the board adopted 2013 meeting schedule up to including May 2013. At yesterday's governance committee, we discussed the board's full 2013 schedule. The sense of the committee is that we should reduce the number of plenary board meetings to a total of 6. The committee recommends meeting every other month beginning in February 2013. The schedule of meetings proposed by the committee is provided for the board's consideration. So I move the approval of the proposed dates for the BBG meetings in 2013.
Mr. Chairman, I think just so we're clear parliamentary-wise, I think the proper motion would be that we rescind the prior schedule that was adopted and substitute in lieu thereof the 6 dates that are here, because we have previously adopted a schedule through May, and this contradicts that. And in other words, rescind what we did,
Right.
and substitute in lieu thereof the 6. And I think from a parliamentary standpoint, that takes care of us.
Right.
And it does represent a substantial change from prior practices, which is starting in February. If this is adopted, we'll meet every other month, and the dates are spelled out, and hopefully these will go on the website once the board adopts it. And then I think the general understanding is, Mr. Chairman, that if there is a need for committee meetings such as strategy and budget, governance, maybe entity board meetings, audit committee meetings, whatever it might be, they would meet during the months in which there's not a full board meeting, and could take the time, more time than we've been when you have to jam it all together to deal with those issues. So I think this is a good step forward. It's a more sensible approach to managing our time. And hopefully this will help us to be more productive than, not to say we haven't been productive in the past, but do it even better.
I agree.
Great.
So is there a motion?
I've made the motion.
Which is, and make sure our secretary gets it right, that we rescind the prior calendar motion adopted, I think, back in October,
Change it out with this.
and substitute this in lieu thereof.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, finally, and this will conclude the governance committee matters. I would like to take care of a small housekeeping matter. The governance committee recommends adoption by the plenary board of the committee reports from March 7th, March 9th, and September 12th of this year. The subjects addressed in these committee reports have been discussed at length by the board at prior meetings, and the recommendations in the reports have already been adopted by the board. So I move the approval of these reports.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passed.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am now going to turn it over to Governor McHugh.
Okay, thank you. It's a great honor to introduce this resolution honoring John Lennon, who's here. John Lennon has served the Voice of America in this agency with distinction for 44 years as a broadcaster, producer, journalist, manager, and senior executive. He served for the past year as VOA's first Associate Director of Strategy and Planning, working closely with the VOA and BBG leadership on planning and implementing our strategic direction. Mr. Lennon served for 4 years as Associate Director for Language Programming, overseeing the output and management of VOA's 43 language services, whose reported audiences grew by more than 20% during his tenure. He served for 7 years as director of the International Broadcasting Bureau, Office of Performance Review, creating new standards for quality control and emphasizing the use of audience research and market analysis in developing new programs and attracting new audiences. His management experience includes service as Deputy Director of the Latin American and European Divisions, Director of the South European Division, and Acting Director of WorldNet Television. Mr. Lennon served as Director in the Office of Democracy at the National Security Council from 1994 to 1995, and in his early career he served VOA as a radio producer, news reporter, documentary writer, and program editor. Throughout his career, he's volunteered to provide professional guidance to employees throughout this agency through mentoring programs. So, and I'm sure there's a lot more to his history and his service to this country that we could go through, but I think some of those highlights speak for themselves. So therefore, be it resolved that the Broadcasting Board of Governors hereby expresses its great appreciation and gratitude to John Lennon for his invaluable contributions to furtherance of the mission of U.S. international broadcasting. And just be it further resolved that an appropriate copy of this resolution will be forwarded to Mr. Lennon and will be on our website. Thank you.
David? Answer, would you like to make some remarks?
If I could just add a quick note. You know, a year ago I asked John to be VOA's first Associate Director of Strategy and Planning, a job that requires working very closely with me and with senior VOA and BBG management on implementing our strategic direction. And I chose him because he's unique. He's uniquely qualified for this job. He's had one of the most impressive careers in the agency, as Susan just noted, as a broadcast producer, journalist, manager, and senior executive. He really has no peer. No one knows more about U.S. international broadcasting than John. He knows more than I probably will ever know, and no one cares more about our mission. It's been his life's work, and I was lucky enough to benefit from his wisdom on a range of issues over this last year and a half. So, John, I'd just personally like to thank you for your service to the United States, to the agency, to me, and to the board, most especially. And thanks to the board for marking this very important moment in VOA's history. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, John.
Want to make a motion to approve the resolution for John?
Please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And, Mr. Chairman, I think the next resolution's saluting Mary Jean Bueller, who was the CFO of this agency for almost 2 years and has moved on to NOVA over at the Department of Commerce. But we benefited considerably from it, and I'd like to move adoption of the resolution as printed under tab 5 in the book, which expresses appreciation. She's not old enough to claim 44 years of service, but she can claim 2 good years here, and we benefited from it, and we're now in the process of searching for a successor to her while Jeff Trimble and Marie Lennon manage it on an interim basis in the transition. So with that, I move the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So moved. Back to Susan, no?
We're going to delay them.
I abstain. You do?
Whatever it is.
We wanted to do Dana together.
You didn't make a single reference to the Beatles. Not one. I know. I was going to do something from Let It Be, but I figured probably better not. Maybe back to the
Oh, a
USSR.
chance.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another resolution to. We have another
Okay.
resolution introduced for our a real special one for our good friend, our admired friend Dana Perino, who, as our presiding chair mentioned, will be leaving the board at the end of this month. And we are saddened by that. It's a loss for the board. She's become, I can speak on a personal level, truly a very good friend But I think what we take with us is that friendship which carries forward. And I know her commitment to international broadcasting remains as strong as ever. And so not only will she continue to be a good friend and close to us, but this agency and its mission as well. Do you want me to hit a few of these highlights, and then I'm going to hand it over to Michael? Michael and Governor Meehan and Governor Perino and myself formed the Communications and Outreach Committee. So for the past 2 years or 2.5 years, we've worked very closely together, and I think, as a lot of you know, we also took a trip to Africa, which was incredibly productive and informative. Couple of highlights in Dana's role as a member of the BBG from July 2010 to this month. She supported the entire mission of U.S. international broadcasting through media participation and efforts in both public and behind the scenes. She's taken a pivotal role in strategic decisions and brought tremendous acumen and energy to her work here on the BBG's behalf. And with her experience at the highest levels of government, she's made an incredibly important contribution to advancing the board goals and the agency's goals. I'll stop there, Michael, or Governor Meehan, and you can take it.
And I also wanted to add, she asked us to ask me to pass along that, you know, she had a career change since the time that she came on the board, and she had a change of towns, and I think that really hurt her ability to make as much of a physical contribution. But I also had the chance to co-chair the Global Internet Freedom Committee with her, and in addition to the work that is an outgrowth of the communication stuff that we all were doing with the Hill and that outreach. And so she helped in many ways bring a lot of different people to the table to help our U.S. international broadcasting effort as well. And you know, when I came to Washington 28 years ago as an intern in John Kerry's office, and in those days you could actually like hang out with a Republican staff, and then over the last couple decades you couldn't really do that. But when I got to this board, to have a peer like Dana sort of restored my faith that bipartisanship can work and people can work together, and she was a shining example of that, and her work here. So her time and contributions will be sorely missed. So therefore, I resolve that the BBG honors Dana's contribution to the agency and extends its deepest thanks for all the work that she's done.
Make a motion for the...
We'll make a motion. It'd be further resolved to an appropriate copy of this resolution be forwarded to Dana Perino.
I'll second.
All in favor? It passes. Yesterday, the Strategy and Budget Committee assembled 2 separate panels of internal and external experts to discuss U.S. international broadcasting to the people of Russia and Iran. I'd like to ask Governor Meehan, chair of the BBG Strategy and Budget Committee, to give a report to the board.
Thank you. So I was joined yesterday by Governor Zass and Governor Mulhop. And we spent a good 3 hours with some outside and inside the agency experts on Russia and the very fluid activities that are going on there. And we had a robust strategy conversation in the morning. And then we spent 3 hours in the afternoon to discuss Iran and the roles that the different networks play in both places at critical times in U.S. foreign policy as well as U.S. international broadcasting. Very robust dialogue, very candid and frank, and very helpful to me as a board member and to us as the board as we think about our strategy and implementing our strategic vision going forward. So I wanted to openly thank those who came, participated, gave their time freely. We had our friend Alan Iyer from the Iran desk in Dubai up until 2 or 3 in the morning. His time to participate. We had a whole panel, folks from Moscow and Russia and other places, and it was amazing. And I'm always amazed at the level of commitment the experts will have to come and give their time freely to us and share their wisdom to help our mission. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank everybody at the agency who came. These are the kind of robust conversations I think help us do the work that we do here. I know that we had a similar one in July on China, and I know that the Strategy and Budget Committee will meet in January, where Rob Bull will help us put together an Africa Mobile session where we'll do similar deep dive on the expanding technology across Africa as well. So we look forward to that, and hopefully, as many of my colleagues that are around and available. I don't think we've set a date yet, but January is the next our next moment for that. The committee also, in addition to yesterday's activities, met on 2 occasions to go through where we are on our efforts by the VOA in Nigeria and Mali, 2 important places across some counterterrorism activity that's happening, and a big priority for the U.S. foreign policy, where we were briefed upon ways that we can make a deeper, more significant impact in an area where we already have a significant impact. 40% of the Voice America audience is in Africa, and we need to continue to grow that. It's an important part of the world. We have an important asset there. And so the committee spent time working with the VOA director and the team about what we can do there. We also spent a significant amount of time on our internet circumvention efforts. The Congress was kind enough over the last 2 budget cycles to send the agency $17.5 extra million beyond what we had asked for in our budget, and so we've really got some programs up on their feet, and the staff came together to figure out how to leverage those programs and to continue to grow them, and we've made significant progress in a short period of time. And I just want to commend the staffs for working on this, because the technology moves fast. It's very tricky. It's very hard for government agencies to work in this space just by the nature of the technology. And we have an incredible amount of people on the outside that have been working with us on the inside on the technology space. I want to thank them for their help as well. Last February, we had an innovation meeting over at Radio Free Europe, where we brought in some of these outside experts, and we broke into certain parts around the world. And one of the outgrowths of that was to send technology delegations to certain parts of the world, and Burma was one of them. And this past week, day before yesterday, earlier this month, Governor Ash, Governor McHugh, and Radio Free Asia President Libby Liu had a delegation of folks inside of U.S. International Broadcasting, plus some technology experts that took the next step on the technology commitment. And so we traveled to Burma. The technology team also spent a chunk of time in India, where we're getting real, on-the-ground, live data and information that helps inform the choices we make on spending the taxpayers' dollars on this spot. And so we're getting help inside the agency and outside the agency in a very robust way. We had some amazing meetings with government officials, party leaders, private media companies, and others. That trip had been planned since last February, but it coincided with a deal that was struck by the bbg wide, which will initially be Voice of America programming on Skynet, and Director Enser was also in Burma and other staff to work on that. So we're making significant progress on multiple fronts in Burma, and we had a very successful trip in the next step of growing our presence in an important place in the world that's recently opening itself up to media and media consumption. And I don't know if my colleagues.
We could do the trip report.
Sorry. You're here. The 3 of you are here. We're eager to hear.
Well,
Sitting on pins and needles.
I am, actually. It's been so in the news. Not your
Okay.
trip, but the area.
all right. Well, I'll hold on the rest of mine, and we can go to the trip
I'm
report.
sorry. Do you want to? I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you want
No, it's all right. I was just going down the list.
Go down the
staff
list.
asked
Go
me
down
to
the
cover
list,
here,
and then we'll come back to
Burma
it.
was on it, so I went to Burma.
No,
But
no.
I'm happy to do the trip report if that's what we want to do.
No. Let's keep going then with this, and we'll come back to the trip report.
I think I covered what the staff has covered, so let's go to the trip report.
Okay. Great.
What you pointed out there in terms of our trip, I think was well put. Again, it's on, yeah. Libby, thank you for your help on that trip. I thought it was also another incredibly informative trip that we did. I was super impressed with the tech team and what's happening in terms of tech and data collection on the ground. I think what we're discovering in Burma can hopefully be useful in other countries as well.
Well, I think again, our audience would be interested to know we all got there on Monday morning, December 3rd, after flying 25 hours across the Pacific, and immediately got in a van and drove up for landing in Rangoon. It's about a 4 or 5 hour trip up to Naypyidaw, which is the new capital that they've created for Myanmar. It's a somewhat unusual experience in the sense that it's 200 miles directly north on an interstate highway that has virtually no traffic. And one evening going back, we almost ran into a baby elephant, literally, that we dodged. I think the elephant would have come out better than the van would have had we impacted. But we got up there right at dusk. And within 40 minutes after changing the hotel, we drove over to the home of Daw Aung Suu Kyi, which the last mile of is on a dirt road, even though it's in the heart of a city, but it's not yet paved. Even though the Parliament and the presidential office make Versailles look like low-income housing, because it's so ostentatious and so grandiose. I've just never ever seen anything quite like it. And a road we drove on for several miles that literally was 18 lanes wide. I think 3 Air Force Ones could have landed simultaneously and taxied down the highway, and the wings would not have touched each other. In this particular area. I see Libby and Dave are nodding at each other because I think we were all just sort of flabbergasted at it.
It's busier in the tourist season.
3 more scooters.
But it was the meeting with Daw Aung Suu Kyi was, as all meetings are with her, just invigorating, reassuring, and inspiring. What a good grasp he has on it, and no bitterness, but looking to the future of the country, and her vision of how RFA and VOA and others can play a role in moving Myanmar towards a democratic system. Clearly, the progress they've made in the last 2 years is incredible, but I don't think you should become overconfident and think that it's assured. It's headed in the right direction. We don't think it'll reverse, but there's always a chance. Certainly the progress could slow down and be postponed. And one of the key issues will be, under today's Burmese law, she is ineligible to be a candidate for president in 2015 because she was once married to a foreigner who is now deceased. And it'll be a clear signal if the parliament changes the law to permit what clearly is the most popular person in the country to be a candidate and be eligible to be elected president. And that will be a pretty good clue as to how sincere and how committed the democratic system is. And then Governor Meehan, we can go over some of the meetings we had the next couple of days with the Speaker of the Upper House, the Deputy Minister of Information, and then we went back to Rangoon for the Skynet signing. And then Ms. Liu and David Inser and I then drove back up to Naypyidaw because we had a 9 a.m. meeting the next morning with the president of Burma, which was not a small courtesy meeting. It was an hour-and-a-half meeting. And I will say I was impressed. He'd clearly been briefed by every minister we met with and had gone over his talking points very well. He knew what the game was all about. And he, again, said the right things. He talked the talk. The proof will be in walking the walk. But it seems to be walking, at least to date. And we need to be encouraging and be supportive. So I'll yield to Governor Meehan, Governor McHugh.
The only thing I want to add is, in summary, Mr. Chairman, I think the key takeaway from Burma is cautious optimism. There's certainly been progress, but things could recede and slip backwards at any point. And that speaks to and underscores the importance of Radio Free Asia and Voice of America and what they're doing in that country, because the cornerstone of any emerging democracy is a free and open press, and that's exactly what they're doing there. We're trying to expand it. So that would be my trip summary.
I just want to make a couple other points. We had a chance to meet with some local Burmese journalists that didn't work for VOA. I mean, we met with VOA and RFA workers, and one of my key takeaways was the importance of the work that we do. I mean, our data tells us we have a 20% audience for both Radio Free Asia, and it's a very trusted news source. Without fail, somebody had a story, whether they're an official, a Burmese official, or a reporter, that there's a radio that's turned into RFA, there's a radio that's turned into the BBC, there's a radio that's turned into Voice of America, and they just always listen to news about their country and what's happening in the outside world through the programming that we all collectively work on. My other big takeaway was the journalism, the freedom of press inside the countries is sprouting, and those reporters that I met with would tell me how they would rely upon our reporting about what's happening inside there, because they're one person in a land of 60 million people. They don't have the coverage and reach that the news gathering capacity that an RFA has in covering the copper mine protest and covering the further regions of the country. So I was impressed with how the mission is working in a place that's been shut down for half a century, and how people have come to rely upon it. And the deputy minister of information spoke perfect English and says, I learned it by listening to Voice of America English growing up. And so it's amazing on these trips to go meet the next generation of leaders who are being impacted by the work that's being done by everybody here, whether it's the VOA English, whether it's the local reporting, whether it's the international news, whether it's these pieces. And Burma is a place where we've got a lot of green sprouts that we need to keep working on, because while there's cautious optimism, even by people who've lived there for a long time, they have a lot of stories how their freedom has been impaired by doing their journalistic endeavor, and times that they've been held and questioned, and they're hopeful, but we need to keep our presence there and be smart about how we do it. So that was one of my main takeaways of the trip, that for me.
I think we ought to, maybe Libby Lou wants to add some things, David Enzer, but it was RFA's staff on the ground there in Rangoon that basically made the arrangements with the Daw Aung Suu Kyi, the president of Burma, all the ministers. And, any schedule in Burma is always a work in progress up until 20 minutes before the meeting. And even then it might change. But it all worked out. And, Libby, do you have some things to add?
I'm so happy about your travel policy, and I'm sure my fellow entity heads agree with me that the more you travel, the better we can do our work, because it's very, very difficult from Washington to see the impact that the work we do has. And every time we travel, we learn so much. In this case, a big takeaway for me was that the parliamentary system and the administration needs a lot of education about how to behave in a way different than a military dictatorship, and the people on the ground need a lot of education about how not instantaneous democracy is. So I think David and I had a lot of good takeaways from our visit.
Yeah, I'd really just like to thank the three of you governors for taking time out of your busy schedules to do this very important work. It made a big difference that you came. It made a difference for VOA's work there and for RFA's, I know. In the meeting with the President, Governor Ash, representing the board, posed the question as to whether the country of Burma ought not to have credentials for journalists, so that if our RFA or VOA people, will be mostly RFA, I would think, are out somewhere where there's a demonstration, where maybe there's violence, they've got something to show the 22-year-old with the gun to say, hey, wait a second, I'm here for a reason. That kind of input, I think, was news to the President. He hadn't thought of that kind of thing. So it was very useful to have Governor Ash there presenting that kind of thought to the President of the country, and he seemed receptive to it. So just thank you very much for taking the time to do the travel. It definitely helped our work there.
Well, we were honored to do it, and it was a fortuitous time because even though it certainly wasn't scheduled, the President had been there 2 weeks beforehand. first time any American president had ever been to Burma. Secretary Clinton obviously was with him. It was, I believe, her second official visit as Secretary of State, but we hadn't had a Secretary of State visit Burma in, 40 years. So, things are moving in the right direction. And then finally, we did meet with Ambassador Derek Mitchell, the American ambassador to Burma, who's a very able diplomat. And I left seeing a young, energetic, good representative of the United States as our ambassador there. And you really felt good about his role as chief of mission.
Thank you very much. It was a great report. We're now going to turn over to RFE-RFL to Steve Korn. But before I do that, I just want to go back for a moment to Governor Meehan's comments about the strategy session. And we decided as a board that as a result of the strategy session, the board has voted to initiate a review of the recent developments in Moscow regarding RFE-RFL to be led by Jeff Trimble. The review is really to provide a lessons learned, look at the changes that are being made, and provide perspective on the current and future media landscape in Russia coming out of the sessions that were held yesterday. And we expect the review to take roughly 6 months. The board thanks Jeff for doing this, and we look forward to the recommendations he'll make to the board. So with that, Steve, I give the report over to you.
Thank you, Michael. I don't have anything to elaborate on in my written report, but as I mentioned yesterday at the Iran strategy meeting, on December 5th, we, together with VOA, launched a show that runs simultaneously on PNN and Radio Farda. It is called Breakfast with News. It is our morning show, and it is radio on television with terrific assistance of Ted Schneider of VOA, who came to Prague for several weeks to work with our folks. We put together a show that, and redid a radio studio into a television studio that we're very proud of. And we just have about a 90-second clip of the opening of the show, which I'd like to show to you.
صبحانه با خبر.
سلام و صبح بخیر به شما در سرتاسر ایران و در هر کجای دیگری از جهان که با ما همراه هستید. سلام، بهروز کارونی، صبحتون بخیر.
سلام حسینی، صبح شما هم بخیر. ناتو روز سه‌شنبه درخواست ترکیه برای استقرار موشک‌های پاتریوت در خاک این کشور.
همچنان که در خبرها به اطلاعتون رسید، پیمان اتلانتیک شمالی ناتو روز سه‌شنبه موافقت خودش رو با درخواست ترکیه. این روزها هم ایرانیایی که در فرانسه زندگی میکنن. آقای خاوند سلام، صبحتون بخیر.
هم با مسائل اجتماعی و کارگری، ولی طبعا ایرانی ها با این سوژه
Things I learned in connection with this show is that apparently Pink Floyd is wildly popular in Iran. That was not just a throwaway. Apparently they're very, very popular in Iran. I think this is a great example of the kind of inter-entity cooperation that the board strategy supports, and we're happy to do it. It's been nothing but a good experience for us, and I hope for David and his colleagues at VOA.
Thank you.
Next, and far more seriously, and in effect far more importantly, I was pleased that this morning that the RFE-RL board passed a resolution honoring our Azerbaijani correspondent, Hadija Ismailova. As many of you know, Hadija was subject to unconscionable blackmail by the we believe, by the Azerbaijani government this past March. I happened coincidentally to be with her in Baku when this all came down. And to say that she is fearless is an understatement. She is a force of nature. And I remember suggesting to her, because it seemed quite dangerous at the time, her life was threatened and her reputation was being impugned, I suggested to her that maybe it would be safe for her to leave the country and come to Prague for a little bit of time. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and like the mere suggestion was, she would throw me out the window for even suggesting it. She's an incredible human being, an indefatigable reporter. She is being targeted because she has exposed corruption in the ruling Aliyev family, but she is pretty much impossible to deter. So I am so pleased. Also, I don't know if you want me to read the resolution, but it's in the minutes. I'm pleased also that through the magic of Skype, she is here with us to spend a minute or two just talking with you. Hadija, welcome.
Hi.
It's quite late. Thanks for staying up.
Thank you for having me with you there. I really appreciate what Jeff said, and I really appreciate what bbg RFERL has done so far to defend its journalists worldwide, and especially for what they have done in my case. I'm really grateful for everything you have done. And that is very important, I think. Do you have any questions to me, or you want me?
Well, you might just say a few words. I should point out that Hadija received the incredibly prestigious Courage in Journalism Award from the International Women's Media Foundation this year, and was feted in both New York and Los Angeles, and has won tremendous number of awards. But for her, clearly, it's about the work, and your work is the best kind of example we have of what we do at RFERL across all of our services. But you have led the way in terms of exposing corruption and fighting the good fight. And we are deeply honored. I know I am, and my colleagues are honored and humbled to be your colleague.
Well, actually, it's honor for me to be a correspondent for RFERL, because Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty is the best America does in my country. And it's not an exaggeration, and I'm not saying it because I work for RFERL. It is really the best America does. RFERL is basically the only evidence, probably, the only evidence of America's principles and values of democracy and human rights. People don't have chance to see lots of those evidences in other fields, sometimes because they are not represented well, they don't reach people out, sometimes because those principles are being compromised in some cases. So, but RFERL is respected by Azerbaijanis, and I'm happy to be part of RFERL, Radio Liberty. It's very important to me. It's part of my life now. It's like I can't even differ myself. I can't imagine myself without being part of RFERL. So this is. So thank you for having me in your team, first of all. And second is, again, I want to again say how much we appreciate when BBG or RFERL management stands for its journalists in such areas, in such countries like Azerbaijan. They don't have us on local frequencies. We are banned on local frequencies because the government doesn't want our reports, our standards, our values being introduced to their people, to Azerbaijanis. So they tried to make us, to diminish our standards, to make us compromise our values, and to downgrade us to their own standards. And when we refused to do that, they blocked us on local frequencies. And but what we did, we still reach out. We're still relevant. We reach out through satellite, we reach out through internet, and that was the right decision to do. And I want to go back into 2009 to those unfortunate days when BBG was in negotiations with the government of Azerbaijan, and the government of the United States was in negotiation. And thank you for not compromising the principles. Thank you for not compromising the journalism for just presence in the country. Because presence in the country without preaching the real journalism, without doing real journalism, without reporting the truth, would diminish, would undermine, would actually kill the value of everything we are doing in that country. So these are the things that are very important. And if I may ask you to do that, I would ask you to continue loudly supporting journalists working for RFRL and even not working for RFRL or Voice of America, because freedom of expression is the most important thing, and they need it. The nation, the people of Azerbaijan need us there. And it's important. It's important to stand by journalists. It's important to stand by values. And I've been hearing the discussion before, and my another hope is sometimes maybe in closer future, maybe Azerbaijanis living in Iran will also be able to hear broadcast in their language by RFRL, and I think we have capacity to do that, and we would love to help the BBG or United States International Broadcasting Agencies to organize and to do this broadcasting, because these are the huge number of people. There are arguments about numbers, but it's estimated to be It's estimated to be at least 20% of the country, and it's a huge number of people. They deserve broadcast in their language. They deserve hearing whatever America has to tell them in their own language. And we speak the same language. We are the same people, so we could help. So this is another thing I would like to comment about it.
Thank you so much. And I know it's very late there, so thanks for hanging on. Does anybody have any questions?
Let me just say, it's good to see you again. When I was in Baku in June of 2011, I remember coming by the RFE office and meeting you and seeing the show that you perform, and seeing you again now. And that was when Ambassador Matt Breiser was still there, and you do yeoman work.
Governor Ash?
Yes, you do yeoman work.
Yeah, I can't see you, but yes, it's good to see you.
Well, I understand.
It's good to hear.
And then we also met a journalist, I forget his name, but who had just been released, who'd been in jail for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
you know exactly who he is, and to see him free. I hope he's still free. I don't know, but you operate under.
He is, but there are about 10 people under arrest now. Yes.
You operate under exceedingly tough circumstances in an environment where the government is frankly hostile to open and free news. So thank you for carrying on the kind of work you do at frankly great personal risk.
Khadija, this is Governor McHugh. Can you hear me? I just wanted to.
Yes, I can hear you.
I just also wanted to extend my thanks. That was a great report that you gave, and I'm really overwhelmed by your courage and your strength and your commitment to our shared mission. So I just want to personally thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks, Hadija. Stay safe.
Hello?
Yes. Thanks, and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask Carlos Garcia Perez, Director of the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, joining by video conference to update the board on the activities of OCB. We have Carlos? There he is.
Today I had an engagement with one of my daughters this morning that I could not postpone. I'm having a little delay here with the mic, but I'm good. I wanted to, I have a tape, but before I begin, I wanted to, first of all, congratulate John on his retirement. He's been cheering us on from the sidelines for the last 2 years. And I want to thank Dana Perino for all the support that she gave Radio and TV Marti and advice through her tenure as a member of this board. The situation in Cuba continues to be a fluid one. Many arrests. Some people say that the government has become more aggressive than before. What we see is that more and more people are coming out and demanding their human rights, and there are more people reporting, and we're receiving more text messages and emails as to events that are occurring on the island. So we are very encouraged with these developments. The presentation that we have, or reports that we have broadcast during the last month, since the last board, they are on video, but just to clarify, these events have also been covered through radio, our webpage, and we have broadcast the news through text messages and email. So having said that, I'll just go to the tape and present our report.
After 19 days in a Cuban jail, Antonio Rodiles, the Cuba-based independent producer of the Emmy-nominated TV Marti program Estado de Sats, was set free.
Antonio Rodiles, el director del proyecto.
Charged with resisting authority, he paid an 800 Cuban peso fine, approximately $34 US, and all charges were dropped. A strong critic of the Cuban government, Antonio Rodiles is one of the coordinators of Citizens' Demands for Another Cuba, an initiative calling for Cuba to ratify the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which was signed in Cuba and acknowledged by the United Nations in 2008. Rodiles is also the creator, producer, and presenter of the television program Estado de Sats, a program made entirely in Cuba where people exchange ideas about culture, art, science, and other aspects of Cuban society. While in jail, the show went on without him. Immediately after his release, he spoke to the Martis.
This type of action will not stop the work that we do.
The arrest and Rodiles' prolonged detention created a spiral reaction from organizations around the world demanding his release. This month, and for the first time in Marti history, original reports are being filed from inside Cuba by independent journalists working exclusively with Marti. In this investigative story from Havana, the reporter penetrates the government-run and once renowned hospital Calixto Garcia. Although it looks like an abandoned building, it is still one of Havana's largest functioning medical facilities. Marti's extensive coverage of the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy centered on the deplorable living conditions. This is what remains of this home in Santiago de Cuba.
We don't have anything here. We're struggling.
Though many are willing to talk, in today's Cuba, a camera raises a red flag.
You guys are not going to solve the problem, never ever in this lifetime.
I am pro Castro, from here to Hong Kong.
Stories like these are part of a new initiative that will allow the use of exclusive original reports from Cuba that journalistically meet MRT standards.
Mr. Chairman, that's our report. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or anybody has any questions, be more than happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes,
Thank
by
you.
phone. Okay, we'll speak to you in a little bit.
Yes, by phone. Okay, we'll
I
speak
think
in
we
a
have a
little bit.
meeting in a little bit.
Thank you.
I'd like to now ask Libby Liu, President of Radio Free Asia, to update the board on it. Or is it David? I'm so sorry. I have everything out of order. I apologize. David, Director of the Voice of America, to update the board on the activities of VOA.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this time I'd like to focus instead of on the hard news effort that is so much a part of VOA's work and of the work of our sister entities on the second part of the charter. VOA is supposed to represent America. And over the years, we've done that in a variety of ways. One of the most famous people to do it was Willis Conover, who basically brought jazz to Eastern Europe, where it's still very strong. I know from having married into the area. We are trying to kind of do a little bit of a revival and an enhancement of VOA's efforts in the area of American music. We're starting a new television music series which will offer a new generation of viewers the access to the best clubs and venues in town. We're calling it VOA Music Alley, and the first two shows will launch December 22nd. One's called Beyond Category with Eric Felton, which features the best of jazz, blues, swing, and more. And Eric is a jazz trombonist and band leader himself, as well as a VOA journalist. He'll give a close-up, intimate look at some great artists, and in some cases he'll jam with them. The second show is called Live at the Hamilton, and it's a concert series featuring the best of live music of all American genres, including jazz, gospel, rock and roll, and country. And it's being shot on location at Hamilton Live, which is a new venue here in town, just a few blocks away from the White House. It's coming in early next year. We're going to also launch a new version of our popular radio program, Border Crossings, which will now be a TV show as well as radio, highlighting host Larry London's interviews with top artists from Beyonce to One Direction. So here's just a very short video clip to give you the flavor of those first two shows.
Welcome to Beyond Category. I'm Eric Felton. As the great Duke Ellington once said, some artists are beyond category. Join me each week as we take you inside the world of jazz and meet the musicians who make it come alive. I might even join in from time to time. It's jazz and blues and swing, music that's beyond category.
So these are just a couple of new offerings that we've got at Voice of America, and these will be useful, for example, on the new feed to Burma that is about to become part of what's available to people in Burma through Skynet, through the deal that you played a role in helping us to finish up and get signed. So we're moving forward. Thank you very much. That's my report.
Thank you, David. I've morphed into the new Michael Litton, apparently. Michael has an important meeting on the Hill, so I will take over from here on out. Libby Lou, your report, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. As usual, our monthly report contains the substantive issues of what RFA has been doing in the last month. I'm about to present our year-end images video card, which we send to all stakeholders and interested parties in our region, and it is narrated by Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. Something happened yesterday that was very disturbing to us, and I just wanted to raise it. Mom Sananda, the incredibly brave person who has been broadcasting, U.S. international broadcasting in Phnom Penh, as you know, has been taken to prison. He's been there 5 months. He has just been denied his second bail hearing, and he's losing about a kilo a month under the harsh circumstances that he's been arrested under. You know, children all over the country are rallying for his freedom, but RFA issued a statement for which we've received much government reprisals about supporting Mom Sananda during this time and asking for his release. I think it's incredibly important that this board recognize how critical his courage has been for us in Cambodia. And then I would like to show our video, which is not necessarily happy, so it's not one of those, you know, season's greetings, yay. But, you know, it's very consistent with the narration of the great lady from Burma.
If we do not have rule of law, which must be inextricably linked to human rights, there can be no peace, there can be no harmony. And where there is not yet rule of law, it means there is no complete justice. And where there is no justice, there is always fear. Because you have no protection from the injustice that might be inflicted on you by others who are stronger or more influential. Dictatorships go in for an emphasis on security, depriving the people of freedom almost altogether. We need to teach our people what freedom entails. Freedom must be accompanied by a sense of responsibility. Now our focus should be on what kind of freedom are we trying to achieve. A democratic society is one where both your security and your freedom are assured by the rule of law. If you've never known how free people live, you might not even know that you're not free. This is why programs like Radio Free Asia are so very important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Brian Conniff, President of MBN.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to first start by echoing the chairman's comments concerning the missing Al Hurra correspondent Bashar Fahmy. We continue to pursue all leads and make his safe return our highest priority. Since the board last met, the Middle East has been filled with endless breaking news stories, the Israeli-Hamas clash, the continuing demonstrations in Egypt and the deteriorating situation in Syria. We've gone to breaking news almost daily to cover these events. And I think it presents a unique opportunity for Al-Hurra as the Arab Spring turns violent and uncertain in its direction. On a more optimistic side, we continue focusing on greater collaboration with our sister entities. We're in the final stages of establishing joint bureaus with VOA in London and New York. And we've just we're working with David and his people in establishing working space for VOA correspondent in Dubai. So a lot of times we have a hard time maybe in Washington dealing with some of the organizational issues, but it's good to know that people in the field work together quite well. We're also having continuing good relationships with VOA and the inauguration, preparation for the inauguration, as we did with the presidential campaign. And it's not just with our sister broadcasters, but in Dubai we have been supporting State Department interest behind the scenes quite a bit. We saw in the budget and strategy session yesterday Alan from the Iranian session. Alan has a show on a video show on VOA on State Department's website called Ask Alan, and we produce it or help them produce it in Dubai. He speaks Farsi, and it's a great show. We also have a lot of training opportunities for State Department in Dubai. Their Arabic and Farsi speaking PAOs come in, and we give them real life experiences being interviewed on TV, and this is an experience a lot of them have never had before they've been posted in the region. So we continue having an excellent working relationship, particularly with the Arab-speaking hub in Dubai. And then just finally, I'd like to mention, with our emphasis on digital operations, that MBN has recently announced a reorganization of its digital operations, which is an attempt to enhance our commitment to the role of digital properties and the value of interaction with our audience. And just to give you an example of a recent story that we did ourselves just for the web. It was a story that was posted on alhurra.com's website, and it was on the topic of Shia demonstration discrimination in Saudi Arabia, which is a very controversial subject and one many of the other stations and websites won't touch. We're pleased that the story generated, in a matter of days, over 600,000 page views, 13,000 Facebook shares, and more than 3,300 retweets. We had a poll as part of the story asking people's opinion on the issue, and we received, in a matter of a couple of days, over 180,000 votes. So the degree of penetration of the Internet is still low in the Middle East, but examples like this show that if you come up with a unique story, it will spread, particularly with the growing mobile device and the importance it's playing in the digital world. So that's my report.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Then we'll turn to Dick Lobo, Director of the International Broadcasting Bureau, to update the board on activities in the IBB.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few brief remarks before I turn it over to my colleagues for their reports. On behalf of the IBB staff, I would also like to thank and recognize our colleague at the VOA, John Lennon, for his many years of support and service to the IBB. Thank you, John. Earlier, Governor Ashe alluded to our former CEO, Mary Jean Buehler, as we voted on a resolution for her. I wanted to tell everyone that the search for a replacement CFO has been going on for about a month and a half. We have some candidates that have now been screened by myself and Deputy IBB Director Jeff Trimble, and we will be presenting some finalists to the Strategy and Budget Committee in the coming weeks for their consideration, and then hopefully we can move forward in filling that very critical position. On a happy note, I'd like to point out that recently we hosted the first ever Spotlight on Excellence Awards. It was held 2 weeks ago here in the office of the briefing office of the VOA, and 6 VOA and OCB services were recognized, one for each of the 6 criteria that our Office of Performance Review considers in this new annual program review process. David Enser and I had the honor of presenting each winning service a frame certificate and a digital LSR camera for the service to use in creating new content. The ceremony was extremely well received, not just by the winners, but even by the nominees, who just appreciated being recognized for their efforts. Our Office of Performance Review conceived the awards not only as a way to boost morale, but to foster a work environment that rewards high performers and outstanding program quality. By awarding the service rather than individuals, OPR recognizes that great programming is a result of a team that includes editorial knowledge, talented presentation, and technical support. It recognizes the contributions of both staff and contractors in meeting their mission. So we thank the members of OPR for coming up with this new tool to recognize talent in the agency, and it was a great event, and as I said, we're going to make it an annual.
6 services.
The 6 services.
Got to name them.
Got it. Don't know if I can have them here. You recall them?
Well,
OCB was one, I remember.
Yeah.
And the rest were in VOA.
Well, let's see. The Vietnamese won for best web work, and they really are astonishingly impactful in that service. I'm trying to think. The Indonesians,
Indonesia?
I think, won for pizzazz, I would call it. Production abilities.
Russian service for Padilis.
Yes, Podolise, the innovative show, online show, won an award.
Okay.
I mean,
got him here, David.
The other thing that was nice about it was nobody knew who was going to win until they got there. It was kind of, open the envelope. And so there was an element of suspense and an element of joy involved.
They were here in the book, in the briefing book. Excellence in journalistic standards, the VOA Khmer Service for War Crimes Child Coverage. Excellence in presentation, the VOA Indonesian service for its high-quality segments distributed to its vast affiliate network. Excellence in technical quality, the VOA Vietnamese service is the second most frequently visited website in VOA after English. Excellence in relevance, the Office of Cuba Broadcasting for Estado de Sats, produced by dissidents inside Cuba and smuggled out to OCB. Excellence in unique VOA/OCB quality, the VOA Urdu service for Sana, a Pakistani, about life in America through the eyes of a young Pakistani woman who has just arrived in the country. And lastly, excellence in audience engagement, VOA Russian, whose social media program, Podolise, on November 1 was the most shared link among Russians discussing the American elections. It was a very thrilling event. Everybody was just delighted, standing room only, and I think people were just thrilled with it. So,
Are you featuring them on the website, too?
we put it up on the website, and we have pictures of the winners and the entries themselves.
Great. Congratulations.
So thank you. Thanks to all of them. Sorry to say Andre Mendez is out of the city. He had a family medical issue that he's dealing with. So to deliver the TSI report is Deputy TSI Director Terry Balaz. Terry.
Thank you very much, Dick. Mr. Chairman and governors, I'll make my report very brief. Not that we haven't been doing much, we've been doing a lot, but I'll just hit the highlights for you. Last weekend, we completed the installation of yet another bbg 24/7 transmitter, FM transmitter in Afghanistan, which is, as we speak, supporting the programming of RFERL and VOA. We hope to get another one finished before the end of the month. We're going to be upgrading our FM transmitter in Kandahar, very important area, again this month, to get a better signal there. And then finally in January, we will have one more, the last of the ones that we have funded for Afghanistan. So we've been moving smartly on that project. And,
Terry, how many in total, do you recall?
When we're finished, we'll have 15, I believe. So good coverage throughout much of the country there. We're very happy to support RFERL in their Breakfast with News program, which you saw some excerpts of, to try to get that video signal back here to the building and into the VOA stream. That started earlier this month. We're also working on our data network, our MPLS network, which is an advanced data technique which will allow us to move signals back and forth more economically and more reliably, and particularly to support video programming from the various production centers throughout the agency. We're working now with RFA to bring an MPLS link back to this building here. We've established one between the London Bureau and MBN, I believe, and we expect to connect a couple of our transmitting stations over the next quarter, as well as the Prague RFERL headquarters. So when we get that more advanced data network in place, it will allow us to bring video back and forth and really enhance a lot of your programming operations. We were, as I said, I've tried to keep this short. Earlier today, we provided to all the governors and entity heads a complete booklet of all of our accomplishments for the past year, and I certainly encourage you to take a look at that. We've been busy, and we hope we've fulfilled your expectations for what we'd like to do. You'll also see in that booklet that our office, the Office of Technology Services and Innovation, has made some very substantial improvements in our results on the Federal Viewpoint Survey when we compare the TSI results to the rest of the federal government. So our people are working hard and working well in support of the mission. I'll just sort of end with some words that Andre gave to me here. From enterprise class reliability to groundbreaking innovation, from the best set of signals ever delivered into the most strategic BBG targets to the most advanced IT platforms, the men and women of TSI continue to provide the agency with outstanding performance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Andre produced about a 2-hour annual report, I guess a week or so ago, in the Cohen Auditorium. There were several hundred people there. It was terrific, very fast-paced multimedia presentation outlining what TSI had done this year and what their plans were for the upcoming year. So congratulations to Andre, to you, and to your entire staff.
Thank you.
As you've heard, we're facing some very challenging fiscal times, and handling the CFO duties here at the agency now that Mary Jean is gone, Jeff Trimble and Marie Lennon, and Jeff is going to give us a very brief update on where we stand financially.
Dick, thank you very much, and governors, I want to thank you for remembering Mary Jean with your kind resolution. I must say that in the course of the last month, working together with my colleague Marie Lennon, I've gained a fresh appreciation for the challenges and complexities of being a CFO in this incredibly difficult budget environment, I could say, to try to put it kindly, for what's happening in this town right now. I'll touch briefly on 3 related elements: the 2013 budget, 2014 budget, and sequestration preparations. On the 2013 budget, we remain on a continuing resolution through the end of March. You're probably reading as much and as up to speed as I am on prospects of getting a 13 budget. I'll just say my own feeling is it increasingly looks as though we may well be on a full year CR. It could even be that Congress along the way would put in a slight rescission, as they often do, a couple of percentage points. But really, we don't know for certain. They may still pass a 13 budget, but again, increasingly, I think we need to prepare to be under a full year CR. For fiscal year 14, we have not yet received a passback for our 14 budget submission from OMB. As you know, normally that comes shortly after Thanksgiving, but it's caught up with everything else in the fiscal cliff and the other discussions taking place about budget issues. We're not sure when we'll get passed back. It could still come between now and the end of the year, but increasingly, again, the betting is that we'll get it immediately after the new year, probably something like January 2nd, and then a short time for appeal, and it'll go forward then in the President's budget submission in February. And finally, on sequestration, we, along with all other government agencies, are looking at ways and working with the entities to effect, if need be, over time required cuts under sequestration should action not be taken on budget reduction issues. The percentage for BBG, as with most other federal agencies, is an 8.2% across the board reduction. That's $61 million. And again, between now and the end of the year and into the beginning of the year, as needed, we'll be working with the agency, all agency elements, to prepare for that eventuality, which we hope, of course, will not come to pass. That's all, Mr. Director.
May I just say on behalf of the board, Jeff, I know that it's, as acting CFO, it's not like you gave up your other responsibilities. So I want to just express our gratitude for you being willing to take on this additional responsibility on our behalf.
I think, Mr. Chairman, it's work for two and pay for one. That's what my wife always tells me in our joint ventures.
All right, next up is our Communications and External Affairs Director, Lynn Weil.
Thanks very much, Dick, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the board has my written report, I'll keep matters very brief. We've sent letters of congratulation to the new leadership of oversight committees in the House of Representatives who were appointed or elected by their peers, as the case may be, over the last few weeks. We've had a series of other correspondence with members of Congress on a variety of issues with which the board is already familiar, some of which was kept confidential with the members of Congress, some of which was publicized. We have, with the arrest and eventual release of Antonio Rodiles, raised the consciousness on Capitol Hill of the dangers of people working with radio and TV Marti, and we gave some briefings to staffers as well as a member of Congress, thanks to the OCB Director, Carlos Garcia Perez. We also had raised the consciousness of the media through a media campaign in cooperation with OCB of that arrest and eventual release. Through news releases, contact with media freedom organizations, and sustained cooperation with the State Department, we have worked with MBN to ensure that the two journalists who went missing in Syria were not forgotten, and when one of them was safely returned home to his family, we also flagged that for the media and got some international coverage, and thanks to the members of the board who helped push that into the spotlight as well. Working with Voice of America, we helped Director Enser prepare for a lengthy on-leadership interview. These are features on management in the federal government that are organized by the Partnership for Public Service, and they appear in the Washington Post. And the interview with Director Enser was published in mid-November. BBG Public Affairs worked with several IVB offices and all the broadcast entities to plan for the annual release of the Performance Accountability Report and the global audience estimate. So thanks to all colleagues involved, just about everybody around the table and in this room. The graphics department has been very busy of late, including during the election season, helping to prepare sets and backdrops and on-the-air logos for broadcasts of the elections leading up to election night. And also, thanks to the cooperation of the graphics department and Voice of America, we now have the 2013 VOA calendar. Governors will have copies for all of you to take with if you like to hand out to your acquaintances and friends and family as appropriate. And the calendar will be going up to Capitol Hill, as well as to people who are, in general, very interested in U.S. international broadcasting. That concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, the Strategy and Development Director's report, Bruce Sherman.
Thank you, Dick. I thought it would be timely. I'm going to dispense with what I had thought I would talk to you about. And in light of the conversation we had yesterday and that we've had a little bit more here today, about travel, about trips, about activities on the ground, I thought it would be very helpful to the board members to give you a packet of trip reports that we have just produced in the last month and 2 months that walk through the issues on the ground that we see in all of our priority markets where we have people very active doing the work that we do, which is to go out and see how we can grow our business. And I want to highlight the great work of our team in doing that, from the negotiated deal just now in Burma that Doug Boynton and our team did in cooperation with VOA, of course, and RFA, and looking ahead to when RFA can also be on Skynet, to the work that Adam Gartner, based in Prague, has just done in the Caucasus, and you have Adam's report there, to the great work that's going on in Latin America that we continue to do, both our regional marketing officer, Oscar Barcelo, and the head of the VOA Latin American service, Alberto Mascaro, and the team there, to highlight that we are out securing new affiliations, high-quality affiliations that are growing the audience for international broadcasting. Some of you heard me say in the Strategy and Budget Committee meeting last month at RFA that in addition to having just published our revised global audience estimate of 175 million, we've logged about 10 million new audience in Latin America. So as we do a running tally of our audience, we're back up to that roughly that 185 to 187 figure. And so it's a tribute to our team out in the field, and I just wanted to share these with you so as to give you a flavor for what it is that actually takes place out on the hustings as people are trying to secure these new affiliations. Finally, I would just say this, Dick, it's in the briefing book. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. For those who don't have the briefing book, in the last month, we brought in $1 million in development monies for the agency. We've got another $1 million in the pipeline. We've secured $400,000 in data licensing sales over the last 3 months. So on the point of bringing money into the agency to support the work that we're doing, we can report significant progress on those fronts, too.
Let me ask Mr. I knew about from our earlier discussion today about the $400,000 that may be generated by selling some of the Gallup information. But what's this $1 million?
It's in the briefing book. It's the money that we are out regularly securing and underwriting from the State Department and the Agency for International Development for programs that we produce on health, on entrepreneurship, on education, on the environment.
So the State Department gives us $1 million?
The State Department gives us grants. We have roughly $4 to $5 million a year from state and AID.
That's public money coming to public money. So I mean, whereas the other is private money.
Data sales are to outside parties. If you say outside the U.S. government, the grants that we get from state and AID are U.S. government money, but it's money that's fresh and new to the BBG.
Well, I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to educate myself.
Right.
And I always learn something, Bruce, when I chat with you, because you're a volcano of information.
Well, and we're spewing forth dollars on behalf of the agency.
Plus, being from the South, I can't keep you speak so fast. It's sort of like drinking out of a fire hydrant. I mean, I just sort of hear a little bit of it, and I try to absorb the first 3 minutes and realize I won't remember the last 3 minutes.
Bruce,
I don't say that to be critical. It's a compliment, but we just don't speak as fast as you do down south.
I appreciate that.
These reports are helpful. So when members of your senior team travel, do they always or often do trip reports? When they
always do trip reports.
They always do trip reports. So can I get a copy of those trip reports? I think it would be very helpful to have more in real time.
Sure.
I would be interested following to send it to me, too. That's a good question Governor McHugh's asked. And I think we're always interested in seeing what people bring back and learn from these ventures.
And I would be happy on the ones that I just gave you to chat with you about the challenges in the field and the opportunities that we see and any questions you might have related to those 6.
Bruce, very briefly, could you talk about the meetings we attended in Berlin this week and some of the highlights of the DG5 meeting, and also if you can recap what went on in Dubai regarding internet issues there?
Well, the meeting that we attended in Berlin is the annual meeting of this group known as the DG5. That's Directors General 5 for the 5 traditional Western broadcasting organizations that have made up this group. So it's our organizations, the British, the French, the Germans, the Dutch. This year, the group invited the Australians and Japanese to come and sit in, and there's a view towards expanding this group to 7. It has been over the years an opportunity for the heads of these organizations to come and talk about strategic issues. We have advanced the collaboration to the point where we're actually making tangible progress on the fronts of research, countering jamming, looking at technical assistance, calling attention to internet freedom and the work we do in support of free flows of accurate and objective information around the world. So it was a very successful meeting on that score. We looked at the agenda for 2013. And talked about the further tangible steps that we want to take in terms of broadening our cooperation and advancing our common interests. We also significantly, and this is something that I would invite us to talk to the board about, and it's a major strategic issue that we discussed this year in our planning for the FY14 budget, and that is that the competition we see around the world from the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, the Qataris, and others, whose activities are not always and sometimes directly contradict, actually, what we undertake in terms of objective journalism, and how their enormous expenditures dwarf the expenditures of not just the United States, but the West generally, and what this portends in terms of flows of information as you go out 5 to 10 years. It's a very serious issue. We spent a lot of time talking about that. In fact, we'll circulate to the board a paper we commissioned in support of those discussions in Berlin. In terms of what was going on in Dubai, that was an occasion just now for countries around the world to come together and talk about internet policy, international communication policy, their efforts, again, by some of the countries I just mentioned, to curtail free flows of information, proposals on the table by Russia and China and others to restrict access to information, restrict the internet. And so what we see taking place here is an effort on the part of these governments to extend censorship, which the United States opposes, of course, and this agency opposes.
Any questions for Bruce? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our report.
Thank you, Dick. The next item on the agenda is recognition of language services anniversaries. I'd like to ask Governor Ash to report on the recent anniversaries, please.
Governor Mulhop, I was privileged a couple of months ago to join, I believe, with David Enzer in visiting the Korean section for their 70th anniversary. You know, it's hard to believe this started, their first broadcast was August 29, 1942, which at that point in is the start of World War II for the United States, or we'd been in it less than a year. And Japan at that time fully occupied Korea. So to broadcast into Korea was quite a challenge. The Doolittle raid over Tokyo had just occurred because we didn't enter World War II until December 7, obviously 41. And August 29 was less than a year later. And frankly, the Empire of Japan was more in the ascendancy of that part of the world in the Pacific, and we hadn't yet fully gotten our feet on the ground and recovered from Pearl Harbor, although the Battle of Midway had occurred. The Doolittle raid, which while it wasn't didn't do all that much damage to Tokyo, at least let the Japanese know that we were capable of taking the battle to the homeland, just as they took the battle to Pearl Harbor and to Hawaii, although they had a lot more damage over Pearl Harbor than we had over the Doolittle raid. And as I recall my history, they landed in China, and some made it and some didn't in terms of the Doolittle raid. But the fact that we were even started then was, and 70 years later, they're still in business, and I think that's very significant, and congratulations to them. And obviously, where they're broadcasting now predominantly into North Korea, which still is a repressive regime and is a challenge to the civilized world in terms of its efforts and rogue activities, is something significant. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Ash. Well, unbelievably, unless there are other items.
I just bring up, we do have, I think Ann Noonan's here. Is she here? Yeah. Asked to address the board. Now, we've never done that before. I don't know if the board has made a decision to do that or not, but we have all seen the email. We have the time to hear from her for a couple of minutes if we want to, but I think it's something we ought to consider. I'm happy to hear from him. It's 3 minutes. So you're here?
On the understanding issue with creating precedents, but on the understanding that it doesn't create a precedent, I think
I don't
we can
regard
discuss a policy for public participation going forward from here.
Okay.
I don't know what you want us to talk about, but I mean, I know she asked.
For 3 minutes, then. Thank you.
I do know she came on the Acela from New York City to be here.
Thank you. My name's Ann Noonan, and I'm the Executive Director for the Committee for U.S. International Broadcasting. I didn't come on the Accelerator. I came on the $49 train ride. Thank you for welcoming me to attend this meeting. I'm delighted that the public is now able to attend the BBG's open meeting. Thank you also for permitting me to speak as hopefully part of what may be the first of many public comments at BBG open meetings. As you know, public comments are a valuable part of our democracy, and I'm hopeful that you will encourage future participation of organizations and individuals to be part of the process. As you know, the Committee for U.S. International Broadcasting is a nonpartisan, non-governmental organization that supports journalism for media freedom and human rights. The first item I'd like to mention is September's mass firing of Radio Liberty, Radio Svoboda journalists, web editors, and other staffers. We remain aggrieved that it has taken the BBG so long to remedy this outrage against U.S. public diplomacy and human decency. I'd like to point out that RFE-RL management fired Bella Kaloeva and Alexei Kunetsov, two fully qualified and fully capable employees with disabilities, and replaced them with less qualified and less experienced non-disabled new employees. I'd also like to point out that the firing of Radio Liberty Russian Services experienced and highly respected journalists and the decision to de-emphasize news and news analysis and replace it on the Radio Liberty Russian homepage with soft features has produced a more than 50% decline in site visitors in just 2 months. The chairwoman of the Moscow-Helsinki group, Lyudmila Alexieva, said that neither Putin nor the former KGB were able to damage Radio Liberty more than Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty President and CEO Stephen Korn. Freedom House has sharply criticized RFE-RL President and CEO Stephen Korn for his actions at Radio Liberty in Russia. Freedom House's president said that Mr. Korn has done Radio Liberty what Putin could never have done. One additional item I'd like to make a matter of record today is about the firing of 4 Radio Liberty Kazakh service journalists last June and the production by RFE-RL of offensive, sexually suggestive videos for this largely Muslim nation. Especially disturbing was the non-renewal of the contract for Nazira Darimbet, a young Kazakh Radio Liberty woman journalist who objected to these videos being posted and questioned RFE-RL President Stephen Korn about the firing of Radio Liberty journalists in Moscow. CUSIB joins the growing number of political officials and human rights leaders in their many appeals to the Broadcasting Board of Governors to restore all of the fired Radio Liberty journalists to their rightful posts. All of these journalists must be returned to their jobs and management, and personnel practices at RFE-RL investigated by the BBG to allow freedom of expression and prevent programming mistakes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. The next board meeting will be held at BBG headquarters here in Washington on February 21st, 22nd, 2013. Governor Linton and I work closely with other governors and Director Lobo to develop the agenda for each meeting. Governors should give us input regarding any topics that they would like to see addressed at the next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, obviously we're below a quorum, so the only thing we can do is adjourn. But we can hear comments, which we've heard. And I do think Mrs. Weil might make a proposal to us on how we ought to handle future public comments. I'm all for doing it, comments we agree or disagree with, but to hear them and to have a public comment period.
Well, the Governance Committee will consider that.
Right, and maybe Mrs. Weil will make recommendations to the Governance Committee. And I assume our February meeting will be here in D.C., although it conceivably could be at another location yet to be determined. I don't want to cut anyone off, but I'm certainly prepared to make a motion to adjourn unless some other governor.
Before we second, I just I think that my time on the board here, we've worked to have the board act in a more transparent process. I don't believe we had webcasting prior to the July 10, and as we continue to evolve, to take input of people across the board. But I would not want to leave the impression that this board is not concerned about the way that all the companies are in conduct, or we just spent 2 solid days here covering a wide range of issues, including some of the issues that that Ann just raised in her remarks. So So I just don't want to leave it unsaid that the board has spent a lot of time on these matters, and we are a mission-driven, journalistic-driven, taxpayer operation, and every member of this board is very sensitive to those responsibilities, even in our part-time status. So I do hope we can figure out a way to plug in more opportunities for the public to have comments. I know that this board tries to have town hall meetings with staffs. I know we've had them when we've gone to RFERL, and we've tried to create more open dialogue because, you know, I've lived in Washington for 28 years, and not all the best answers are in Washington, D.C., and I know that every day. And I think that this board does strive to have that openness and transparency, and I know that the Governance Committee will take a look at this and bring options back to the board to have this be a more orderly process.
So the Governance Committee should get together, and then at the next board meeting, we'll recommend a policy for public participation.
Okay.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that Governor Linton, when he was here, did point out that Jeff Trimble is going to lead a review of the issues that have come up with RFERL. That isn't to point fingers at anyone. It's just a fact that we'll do a review and come, and I'm sure Mr. Trimble will come up with recommendations as to what we should do, what we shouldn't do as a result of some of those issues. He has tremendous background in this area because he has great experience, and I can't think of a more knowledgeable person to look at this matter and then come back to us.
Hey, thank you very much. I think it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? I guess we don't have a quorum, so it really doesn't matter. Okay.
Well, we can make a motion to that. I move we adjourn to the February.
We're adjourned until February. Thank you. Happy holidays to everyone.